Hey, sweetie. Hello. All right. I hope that that's the only time I get the little thing that says wireless connection not good enough because I'm sitting in my lounge and the thing's not far away. It's a rainy day. Maybe that's the reason. Anyway, before I launch into the topic today, as usual, because I'm on Facebook and it takes a while for the live to come up, and then my husband has to share it out to the group so that people can jump on live if they want to, which is why I'm not jumping into the topic straight away. I'm going to show you some rocks because it's cold and raining outside. It is quote unquote summer in Wellington, New Zealand, and sometimes in summer it's just not summer. And actually, it's really good that it rains because otherwise the ground gets very dry, and we've had some of that. So today, oh my God, this celestite. I haven't been able to show you this for yonks because they haven't had many rainy days. Yeah, it's saying the connection is slow. I hope it's all right. It's not like there's anything I can do about it. So let's cross our fingers and hope that this is fine. So this is celestite, and it's beautiful, and it's blue, and it's shiny and sparkly. And look at the shapes in here. I don't know how that happens. I think something has been right next to the crystal when it's grown. I don't know. But I love it. I love it. I love this reflective surface. You can see all the texture on it. I think it's reflecting the world outside, probably the cherry tree in the sky. And it's fabulous. It's got that big crystal, and there's another big one under there. And then there's this cluster of small ones. And even the bottom, I mean, you can see it's been cut off a wall and it's got a number. But I really enjoy this. So there we go, celestite. And it's kind of cloudy and blue and lovely. And yeah, I hope the connection's okay because Facebook is telling me the connection is slow and it shouldn't be. But, you know, sometimes it just doesn't work so well. This is kyanite. We're doing blue today, by the way. I walked up the crystal shelves and thought, I'm doing blue. So, yeah, kyanite blades. God, I've forgotten what I used to know about kyanite. You see, I'm out of practice. I haven't been doing this for a long time. And so all the neural connections inside my head that used to contain all the information that I have about kyanite got rusty. I don't know if they're pruned apart, but I'd have to go digging. But I do enjoy this. You know, it's obviously a very striated thing. It's a relative of mica, which if you've ever seen mica, and a decent chunk of it, it's layers and layers and layers. And I have been in my body for long enough that I remember my father having a chunk of mica, and he would take a little slice off the top of it, and he would use it like a washer when he was doing plumbing at home. So this is kyanite. And last but not least, the total favourite that everybody loves is blue lace agate. And it's gorgeous. And it pretty much is this colour. The light, you know, it's quite cold and overcast out there, but the light for showing these crystals is just beautiful today. So you can see all the, well, not the reflection, see all the detail there. It's just glorious. I love that. And you can see right into the stone. You know, this dark line is actually clear, but you can see inside, which is why it's dark. So I'm very fond of these pieces, and I enjoy sharing them with you, and I just hope that the connection is good enough. I don't know, it keeps saying that it's slow. So I'm kind of thinking, you know, it'll be almost good to start again, but if the connection is slow, it just means that the satellite isn't overhead, and there's not a lot I can do. So I'm going to get going, and I know it'll be recorded. And the worst thing that can happen is that I have to do it again tomorrow. So I'm going to get going. Today, I picked up, of course, as I always do, where I left off last week. And last week I was talking about, because I'm actually getting into explaining emotional addiction now. And what is emotional addiction? Well, what is an addiction? And I learned this definition from Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I like it very much. He says that an addiction is anything that you can't stop. Anything at all. Whether it is complaining, which is, I know people who just, they open their mouths and they complain. and it isn't nice, and I don't like to be around them. It might be eating sugar. It might even be exercise. I remember when I was a small person at school, one of our teachers was into long distance running, and he was kind of addicted to the endorphins. Not a bad addiction, but we can be addicted to anything. We can be addicted to feeling good, and that's not a bad thing. It just depends how we make ourselves feel good, right? We can also be addicted to feeling bad. And how that can happen, even though we don't like feeling bad, is that our bodies get used to whatever is normal for us. So if we're feeling bad all the time, our body starts to think that that's normal. Instead of us feeling, normal, neutral, whatever, if we're feeling bad all the time, that becomes our normal neutral, is to feel bad. And so then when we want to feel something different, it's really hard because our body is accustomed to it. And it's like an addiction. You actually have to break that chemical continuity. Your body is just used to feeling a certain way. Because when we think a thought, we make a chemical messenger that goes to our body that gives us feelings. And those feelings, if there are enough of them, we will notice them and we'll call them an emotion. We'll say, I feel afraid, I feel sad, I feel angry, whatever it is. That is how we get emotionally addicted, because if we do it often enough, it becomes normal to our body. And our body says, okay, this is normal, I'm going to keep going for normal. And when you decide that you don't want to feel sad anymore, you don't want to feel angry, or you don't want to feel afraid, and I personally experienced this myself, and it's powerful, and it can be a very big war inside your own head and your own body. When you say, I don't want to feel like that, I've felt that way for the last 50 years, but I don't want to feel that anymore, your body says, excuse me, I don't know how to feel anything else. And this is normal, and normal is safe to me, so I'm actually going to fight you. You want to feel happy? I don't want to feel happy. And it starts sending really nasty thoughts. It sends a signal, literally the body sends a signal to the brain and makes the brain fire a thought that's going to make you feel just like you're thinking. Horrible thoughts come out of nowhere. Really ugly thoughts. And that's the body can do that. It can actually be the mind. It can take over our brain and say, no, I want to feel sad. I want to feel angry. I want to feel upset. I want to feel scared because I'm used to that. And so our body is the addict. And we're in our body and we want to feel something different, but our body wants what it knows. And it can be very difficult to change. That's why it's so often difficult to change, because our body says, but I've had this happen and this happen and this happen in my life, and that's a really good reason why I should feel awful. Hi Kiki, hi Chamaras, lovely to see you. Yay! It's working, even though Facebook keeps telling me that the connection is slow. Obviously it's working, yay! So, our body gets used to whatever we think and feel the most. And if we decide to think and feel something differently, then our body's going to say, no, I'm used to you thinking and feeling this. I want you to go back to thinking and feeling this. And that is like an addiction. Hi, Augusta. It's literally what happens with an addiction. If you think about somebody, the heroin thing, right? They take a shot of heroin. It bombards all the opiate receptors in their brain and in their body with all these opiates. It's like, oh, this is cool. But if you do that, even the first time, it's like, it's amazing, it's a rush, it's incredible. But then the next time, those receptors have been so overwhelmed that they become less sensitive. Or there are fewer of them, which is what I want to talk about today. And so the receptors on our cells change so that, then you need more heroin to get the same kick. And then the receptors get overwhelmed and over-bombarded and over-demanded again, and so they down-regulate some more. That's what we're talking about today, is down-regulation, by the way. And that's how an addiction happens. The cell accommodates the fact that there's heaps and heaps and heaps of something that there isn't normally heaps of something. Hi, Nancy! It accommodates the fact that suddenly there's this great abundance of opioids because, a person's just taken a shot of heroin or whatever. And it says, oh, well, this is amazing, but I kind of can't handle this. I'm overstimulated. I better pay less attention next time. And that's why you need a bigger hit next time, because the cell changes. And so, that's one example, is if somebody takes their first shot of heroin and then they do it again and then they do it again and everything gets desensitized. Hi, Anne Christine. But there's another situation. This is what happened. I went back to my writing, and I know I talked last week about how if you have a set of stall holders, you have some stall holders in a market, and they've got a stall and they sell this really cool food that everybody loves, and there's these big long queues of people, and the stallholder can't keep up, so they bring someone else on to serve more people. And I said, and I think this can actually happen, but it's not the only way that it can happen, and I don't think it's the most common thing that happens. I don't actually know. I need to do more research. And I thought, okay, I give in, I'm going down the rabbit hole, and I looked up a few things. Because what I really wanted to do is, I know last week I talked about the fact, the stallholder puts more people on. That's like saying, let's have more receptors for the chemicals. There's tons of whatever chemical going on in your body, so let's make more receptors. And that's what I thought happened. But when I went and looked it up, because I wanted to give a real example, it's like, oh, this is really cool information, but what does that look like? And so I thought, okay, you take type 2 diabetes, right? You have insulin, which is a hormone that's produced in your pancreas, and this is what I looked up, this is what I wrote. And there were bits of what I wrote last week that just gone, because I realized this isn't working. And I went away from the market and I went back to the spaceship that I talked about a little while ago, because that's a really good example of how cell has receptors on it, and they're specific to the kind of thing that dock into the receptor. And so I went to that example. But I started looking up what happens when a person gets type 2 diabetes. Hi, Nori! And what happens is that over a period of time, and for whatever reason, whether they eat the wrong foods or, there can be other reasons why people get type 2 diabetes, but diet and lifestyle is the biggest reason, that their cells are constantly in this blood bath of high levels of glucose because they just keep eating sugar. Yeah, it's nice to see you too, Kiki. I'm here once a week now. And so, for whatever reason, maybe they eat a high carbohydrate diet, or they can't exercise because they have an injury or whatever. There's too much glucose floating around in their blood for a long period of time. And what happens is that the insulin receptors on their cells, what should happen is that the insulin comes along, it grabs a molecule of glucose, it docks into the receptor, it brings the glucose into the cell, and then the glucose can be burned up and used as fuel or whatever it is that needs to happen. It's not there because most of the insulin works on either our liver, so we can store the sugar that's in our blood for later use, or it gets it into our muscles where we can use it, right? That's what most of the insulin does. It goes other places as well, but that's, the majority. So that's what happens when it's normal. But if there's all this glucose going on and on and on and on and on, the receptors get tired. They don't get to, like with the story that I told of the spaceship, and you have this docking port, and the shuttle comes in and it opens up and all this machinery whirs into action, and the message that's in the shuttle goes into the factory part of the ship, and it makes some parts, and that's going into the DNA and making proteins for the structure and the function of your body. But if you have a long queue of shuttles that want to dock, what's supposed to happen is that the shuttle does its job, it leaves, and the port gets to reset, and it gets to recharge its batteries, and they get maintenance. Hi, Adrian! All the machines get oiled, and everything's beautiful, and then the next one comes in. But if there's a long queue, it doesn't get to do that. It's just endless, relentless demand, and so the thing starts to break down. It starts to get tired. And so this is what happens for somebody who's getting type 2 diabetes, that there is so much glucose in the blood all the time that the insulin receptors get tired. And then what happens? Actually, there's lots of things that can happen, and I have steadfastly and very clearly decided I'm not going to go into all of that detail because it's not what I want to explain. This isn't about cell biology, but I want people to understand what happens in the cell. Just basic, like. So what happens then, what can happen then? There's lots and lots of different ways that the cell can adapt. But let's say a cell next door dies because it's got tired and old. It's got worn out, right, by too much glucose, and it's broken down. So the one next door goes, oh, this needs replacing, I better divide. But here I am sitting in a world where there's tons and tons of glucose and I can't keep up, and it's really hard. I've managed to stay healthy, but it's hard to keep up with all this glucose. I'm tired of that. I've got all these receptors on my cells and they're just constantly being bombarded and it's exhausting, and, forever I'm just doing stuff. Hi, Laurie. I think I'm going to when I divide, I'm going to make it so that my daughter cells have fewer receptors for insulin. That's what happens. The cell changes. It has fewer receptors now. And that's really, that's not the only mechanism. I discovered in my brief, rabbit hole excursion that, this is very simplistic. You can have things like the insulin will get into the receptor, but when it gets into the cell, it doesn't work properly. Or the receptor is there, but it just doesn't pay attention. It doesn't work. It's like receptors normally have a little antennae that's buzzing away and it's looking for a molecule that has a resonance that matches itself, because it knows that resonance means, if I guide this molecule in, it's going to be able to cut. It's a peptide, right? It's a peptide messenger from the brain. It's going to come in and it's going to signal the cell, and that's all good. But, that radar is really sensitive. What happens if that radar becomes less sensitive because the cell is just exhausted and it doesn't have the energy to run that radar properly? Well, that matching molecule can be floating around out there, but the cell's not going to reach out and guide it into dock and do its thing. So that's called resistance. So you can have, and I've forgotten the names, but one of them, at least one of the things that can happen is that the cell just stops receiving stuff because it doesn't pay attention anymore. It becomes resistant, and then it becomes insensitive. I think that's the right thing, because the insulin goes in and it just doesn't do its job anymore. It doesn't work properly. So lots and lots and lots of ways that our cells can down-regulate. That's down-regulation. The cell, when it divides, down-regulates some function so that something it was doing normally and healthily before, not doing normally and healthily anymore. And it's actually how we get sick, right? If you keep bombarding your cells with the wrong chemical mix, you're going to get sick. And that's how it happens. You just keep doing that over the time. The cell is going to change its genetic expression. So I do know, because I've heard Dr. Joe say it, that cells can make more receptors. It's like, the example he uses is if you're in a supermarket, right? And there's 2 checkouts open, but there's big long queues. Well, they're going to open up more checkouts to process those customers. And that was the original place where I started working. Hi, Lisa Louise! That was what I originally started writing about, was the market example. But I couldn't find a good, simple, relatable example of it that I could explain to people. And type 2 diabetes, most people are sort of familiar with that. And the point is that if your receptors on your cells, and instead of sugar, we could say happy chemicals, or it doesn't matter. If the receptors on your cells are less sensitive, or the chemical that's being produced is faulty because, the machinery just got tired and it's not working anymore, that means that if it's less sensitive, you need more of the same chemical to be produced to get your cell to turn on. So that means that if you've been angry for however long, and your cells have gotten tired of being signaled with angry chemicals, and so they've become less sensitive to them, you're going to have to get angrier to get the same response from your body. You might even go looking for people and situations that you can go, oh my God, look at that. That's so disgusting. I hate that person. That really pisses me off. We do this. We scroll. I don't. I really don't. 1, I don't have time, and 2, I just don't want to be reacting to everything. But you see people, and it's like they go looking for things to feel angry about, or they go looking for things to feel sad about, or they go look, and you normally don't have to look for things to feel afraid about. I never had to look for things to feel afraid about. It just comes really naturally. Whatever it is that we are used to feeling, that we look for more ways to feel that, because we want the rush We don't realize it, but we are looking for the response from our cells when they get hit by those stress hormones. This is what, So this is what I'm trying to untangle, and to do it in a way that's really simple. And again, I say my mostly ignorance is my superpower, because it stops me from going into too much detail. I don't want to be teaching biochemistry. I want to explain the concepts. This is how we can get emotionally addicted, because we still, the first time and I remember I worked with somebody who really was addicted to anger. And I didn't understand about any of that at the time. I didn't, or I would have stopped a long time before. But there was a point at which she said, hey, I'd like to just have a session with you where I get to express all these angry feelings that I've had for a long time. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Spencer. Oh, it's great to see you all on. Lovely to have you here. And so I actually did that. And it was just about the time that I was starting to learn about this from Dr. Joe. And I thought, and I mean, that felt really good. And it did, because she got this big rush of anger chemicals. And the stress hormones are addictive. They give you a rush. They give your body energy. You wake up. You feel enlivened. And of course, she wanted to do it again. But I just thought to myself, this is wrong. I don't want to sit here and just let somebody pour shit on me because it makes them feel good and they'll pay me for it. That was really wrong. And I said no. And predictably, that person was very angry with me because I was no longer willing to be there and help them indulge their addiction. It was a really powerful example that I actually lived. And later, of course, I lived my own experiences of being really, really addicted to fear. Tell ya! And the experience quite recently of my body just wanting to throw me back into the past, because that was what it knew. It's what it understands, what it knows. Let me go back to the past. I do not want to feel good. That is not safe. I feel safe feeling unsafe, is really how it was. So that's what I wanted to explain today. I did get myself mixed up. I looked at what I was writing and I thought, this is wrong, it isn't correct. And if there's one thing I want to do with this, is to make sure it's right. Not in depth, but correct. I want the concepts to be clear. The other thing that was interesting this week, I did this just last night, is, my husband, and if you look at either my God of Me page or the Oneness Evolving profile, you'll see there's a pinned post at the top with this really cool little cartoony pictures of a story that we're illustrating, a different spaceship story that I wrote months and months ago. And so Lawrence managed to knock out the first 4 pictures of that really beautifully on his own. And so I said, okay, let's do another 4. Let's illustrate the next piece of the story. And I tell you, he struggled, and so did I. It's really difficult. Because the next piece of the story is this conversation where people are asking questions, and it's like, you can't do all of that. It'd be a mile long. So we spent some time last night just knocking it around, and I drew ugly pictures because I'm not nearly as good at doing toony stuff. I can be very artistic and sort of creative, but drawing stuff the way he does, I don't do very well. So we banged stuff around, and it's like, oh, how are we going to do this? And do we need that in? Do we need this? And it's like developing a storyboard for a movie, except that we don't have to tell absolutely everything. I have to remind myself, and I have to remind him, we are illustrating the story, not telling it completely. Great to see you, Kiki. So that's where we're at. So look out for that. We will come up with something. But I want you to understand that it's not all easy. We don't just get to, pull it out of our heads and it's simple. These things are sometimes really hard to think, how am I going to draw this? And it's just, we'll get over this hump, and I think we did. And then, so we sort of got 2 frames out of the 4, not drawn because he's got to go away and do that, but pretty sort of agreed on what they'll look like. And then he said, that's it, I'm stopping. It's like, I could tell my brain was fried too. It was like, it was tiring. It was hard work. Because we're both using our frontal lobes and looking at this thing, and what the frontal lobe does is it goes through all of the memory files. What about this? What about this? What about this? And we were trying things out and throwing mud on a wall to see what sticks. And it was like, ugh. And we figured it out. At least something. So he's got something to work on because it was challenging. And I got to go. I know it's time. You know, I'm pretty much done. And you're welcome. I love talking about this stuff. And I love that you join me in this experience of working out how to talk about it in a way that's simple and clear and that's right for me to do. I don't want to lead people up the garden path, but I do want to empower them. And that's what God of Me is about. And if you haven't clicked on the link in the description and gone to my Patreon, have a look, please do. It costs nothing to follow. You can follow for free. And if you get inspired by what I'm doing, what we're doing, it's not just me, it's my husband and me, and you, if you're the community, you're doing it too. And it will become more, there'll be more participation as we go along, because sooner or later I'm going to start developing little exercises that people will do so they can actually experience the truth of what I'm talking about. Because theory and philosophy is great, but I want people to experience it so they can go away and apply it. That's the whole point. So, yeah, check it out. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching on YouTube. And feel free to share, feel free to subscribe. It's lovely to have you on the journey. I'll keep you posted. Please do drop any questions and comments below. And until next week, I send you lots of love. Be well, and I'll be back. Bye-bye.